good morning and welcome to this World Hydrogen Week pre-event interview. We're with Morten Stahl, who's a partner at Natural Hydrogen Ventures. Morten will be speaking at World Hydrogen Week, taking place in Copenhagen from the 30th of September to the 4th of October. Welcome, Morten.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
So just to start off for our audience, would you be okay just giving some background to yourself and your company and some of the work that you've been doing, particularly in natural hydrogen?
Yeah, of course. As anyone in this industry, I haven't been here for a really long time because the industry is not that old. But relative to the industry, me and my partner, it was based in Houston, we've been doing this now for 2.5 years. I stumbled across natural hydrogen while doing climate investing. That's my background. Been doing climate tech investing for many years, and stumbling across natural hydrogen, I quickly realized the truly game-changing potential of something that is actually cheap enough to be widely used, potentially cheap enough to be widely used, and at the same time have a low carbon intensity. So this is something that could truly speed up the energy transition and make a great profit at the same time. So that's kind of our dual purpose. We're investing to get our kids a financially secure future on a livable planet. That is what we're here for.
Okay. And just for our audience who might be new, because natural hydrogen's relatively new in the world of hydrogen production, could you give a bit of brief explanation as to how it differs from, traditional renewable grey hydrogen?
Of course. And I think actually is that we could start with, what are we calling it? And our company is called Natural Hydrogen Ventures. It is still the most widely used name to describe it, but I think in many ways a more accurate way would be calling it geologic. Because what sets this type of hydrogen apart from others is that it isn't produced, it isn't man-made. It is created by nature in the subsurface. So it's something that you can drill and you can extract it just like oil and gas, but without all the carbon attached to it. So because you're not producing it, because you don't have an input cost of renewable energy or methane, like when you do blue hydrogen or gray hydrogen, you can potentially end up with something that is extremely cheap. And this is geologic hydrogen, natural hydrogen.
And sort of overall with the market, are there any particular challenges, not just within natural geologic hydrogen, but within the overall hydrogen industry that you've identified?
Well, I think that which also connects well with the reason to do what we do, because we are exclusively investing into natural geologic hydrogen. And this is because to really kickstart the hydrogen economy or to actually get it to happen, hydrogen needs to be cheap enough. Only very few people have the luxury of starting to pay 3 or 4 or 5 times more for energy or other products that you do already. So it has to be cheap. And I think that is general the problem with the hydrogen industry as it is, that you don't see enough final investment decision. You don't see enough happening because the hydrogen isn't cheap enough. But if hydrogen were cheap enough, either brought by geologic or natural hydrogen or some new development, you would start seeing people buying more trucks that runs on hydrogen. You will have more transportation. Every company touching on the hydrogen industry would see a huge growth in demand for your products. But as it is right now, that's not happening because nowhere is the hydrogen cheap enough to be competitive with fossil alternatives.
Okay. And just sort of moving, along that sort of thread, with you speaking on the topic of natural and geologic hydrogen at World Hydrogen Week, do you think it has the potential to solve the cost problem?
Definitely, definitely think so. I would say we know now, and this is a lot of things that are happening in the last 2 years, that there is a lot of natural hydrogen in the subsurface. So what the industry now is figuring out is how to find the big commercial quantities. And from what we know and see in the industry, we see this as being overwhelmingly likely that we will find this in the coming years. But I would say, my best guess would be we're either looking at something that will be a really good business for a few. There is a commodity called soda ash that you use in glass production, and somewhere in the world you can dig it up, from the subsurface, and you are a low-cost producer. Rest of the world have to do it through a chemical process. Maybe this is where natural hydrogen will end. Or maybe it is something that you can find just as many places as you find oil and gas, and it will live up to the complete game-changing potential. But you can do numbers that, reasonable to assume X amount of hydrogen flowing from these wells. That means that you will get to a cost of approximately $1 or even below $1 a kilo of hydrogen. And that is purified, but at the well head. So you will, of course, need to figure out how to transport it. Pipeline or turning it into something else, which is our thinking, turning it into ammonia, methanol, sustainable aviation fuel. So you're turning it into something that is transportable and sellable.
And so do you think then with the recent discoveries of natural hydrogen, the not so traditional blue and green hydrogen or renewable CCUS hydrogen will become more obsolete in the future?
Well, I think I'm a really big believer that we need everything. There is no, silver bullet fixing the climate or energy transition issues. But I do think that if geologic or natural hydrogen gets as cheap and as widely available, that means that a lot of projects of green and blue will never be built. But I still think that it could also give time for green and blue technologies to mature enough so that they can be competitive. So let's imagine that geologic hydrogen moves really fast. Maybe someone in the US have already made some interesting discovery. Maybe the guys working in Australia are producing soon. We don't know, but let's say that really kicks it off, and we start having a lot of cheap hydrogen. That creates the demand, and demand that makes it more interesting to put more money into making green hydrogen more competitive, lowering that price, lowering that of blue. So as I've seen some of the guys from the Department of Energy in the US saying at some point that maybe natural hydrogen will pave the way for the green and the blue when it gets cheaper, which could be needed as well, because we don't know yet how much natural hydrogen are we going to find. Maybe it will be cheap, but maybe there won't be that much of it, so we'll still need supporting supply. So base case is definitely this could work together, and as I'm sure green and blue industry knows, some places in the world you can probably see a way to get it really low cost, and other places it will be too expensive to produce blue and green, and maybe you'll have geologic instead. But I must also be true to what we've decided to do. There's a reason why I'm not investing in green and blue. It's because I believe that it has to be cheap and it has to be moving fast. And I think the best option, that is natural hydrogen for the 10-year future, which is accidentally the timeline of our fund.
Yeah, brilliant, thank you. And just sort of a follow-up question, just piqued my interest. How many sort of deposits of natural hydrogen have been, found at this moment in time? Are there any particular place? You mentioned Australia. Are there any particular areas in the world where you find large deposits?
You've seen a lot of activity right now in Australia and in the US, and you have an original discovery in Mali, West Africa, but it is really early stage. So there'll be a lot of people totally, have a good point pointing out that right now we don't have any commercial production, and that is true. But we have a potential of something that could be, because if you're looking at something that will make hydrogen being widely used, not having yet found commercial quantities of natural hydrogen is just as bad as green and blue not being cheap enough. It doesn't matter for the end case that you could actually technically do it, but if it's not cheap enough, we're at the same place. It's not going to happen. It's not going to be used widely enough to support the energy transition. So it's equally big problems. And that is my bet, and I don't have to agree with everyone, that I think we are closer to leveraging the skills of oil and gas and mining industry. Remember, this is tens of thousands of companies, millions of people who know how to do this. I think that is a safer bet that will make it work and find commercial quantities than it is on the shorter time scale that we can get green and blue down low enough in costs.
thank you again for joining us, Morten, and thank you for giving very detailed answers. For all those watching who are interested, Morten will be speaking on natural hydrogen at World Hydrogen Week, obviously taking place at the Bella Centre in Copenhagen later this month. So yeah, thank you again.
Thank you. I look forward to being there.